Hello and welcome to another episode of Roll for Lit. This is going to be a wrap-up for all the things that I read in the month of March. March was like the first time I've actually read books in a very long time. It has been a hectic few months to say the least, with moving and my personal life being in shambles. So it was very nice to have a month that relatively was pretty easygoing and uneventful. I mean, this was my first month in my new home, and there's little things that you have to do when you do a new home. There's little problems that arise and little upkeep and stuff like that, and that was all things I was expecting. So just little things here and there, but nothing that was wild or earth shattering. So it was actually a really kind of nice month for a change. Hopefully, that is a sign that things will be a little bit more easygoing in the next little bit, but who knows? It is my life after all. So, in the future, I don't know how I'm going to be doing this. I don't know if I'm just going to cover RPG related books or I'm going to cover everything that I've read in a certain month. But for this time, I'm just going to kind of do this like a normal wrap up and just tell you everything that I read in the month of March. So starting off, there was a Batman comic that I had started for the February Wasted Weekend, which is there's Garbagus, which is an event run by Criminali, and the Wasted Weekend is a thing where you marathon a bunch of books in a weekend. I did really bad this year. It was probably my worst Wasted Weekend as far as actually getting things done, and that was for very good reasons. It was just a bad time for me. So there's a few little holdovers from that, like this one, Batman Full Moon. This is a book where Batman fights a werewolf. And Batman also, spoiler alert, becomes a werewolf. So it's two werewolves duking it out. And, there's some cool violence. There's some cool bloody sequences. And it's interesting because, John Constantine is in it and everyone loves John Constantine. And basically Batman is dating Zatanna, who is this little witchy lady. And then freaking werewolves come in and everything goes topsy-turvy. Yeah, I liked it. It was weird, but, I don't think it was anything super, groundbreaking or notable. Similarly, there was another comic book collection I read called The Edge of Venomverse. Now, Venomverse, I don't know, it's all of the many Venoms from across different realities. Venom being the Spider-Man villain, the one with the long tongue, and, is in those movies. Now, I had never read any Venomverse anything, and basically I have read a bunch of the Spider-Verse comics, which is all the Spider-Men coming together in a big crossover event, and the Edge of series for that was actually some of the best stuff. That introduced a lot of really interesting and unique ideas for Spider-Man. Venomverse was just kind of lame because for me, it was almost all just what if a blank character had the Venom symbiote, which is not interesting. Because, Spider-Verse is not just what if Captain America had Spider-Man's powers. No, it's what if a different character got the powers of Spider-Man from a different culture, from a different background, from a different, walk of life, and if they were rich, if they were poor, and they had all these specialties. Where, this one is just what if Wolverine had a symbiote suit? And I was I don't care. Get this out of here. This is boring. So yeah, I thought that was really kind of boring and mid. Then I read two Horus Heresy novellas. Now, I have pretty much read every single Horus Heresy story. Yes, actually, I think these two were the last two things in the Horus Heresy franchise that has been released that I hadn't read. I've even gone back and read some of the short stories that were not collected anywhere. So I think I've got everything. Now, I'm sure there's new stuff always coming out with this as well, but anyways. Horus Heresy. What is a Horus Heresy? This is a Warhammer 40,000 thing, and this basically is this big intergalactic civil war between two branches of guys in power armor, and there's demons, and there's all kinds of shenanigans. This is a two-set of a novella series that was released to coincide with a game. I think there was a kind of a board gamey thingy called the Battle at Kelth. And the Battle at Kelth is one of the big events in the Warhammer Horse Heresy. It's basically like there are these guys who are blue called the Ultramarines, and they are betrayed by people named the Ward Bearers, who are basically gone in league with demons. And this is all. Both of these novellas are about the aftermath of that battle, which is like the sun gets all demony, and I don't know what happens to the sun. The sun just makes it so that the entire world is like irradiated, and the sun is going on full blast and makes the entire surface of this once great world uninhabitable. So everyone is underground in these like little underground tunnel systems, and they're all kind of like having these fights. And it's interesting because the Honored by Rob Sanders, which is from the Ultramarines perspective, is a very, and both of these are like from the same event. The same events are happening in both, but from the perspectives of the different characters, which I actually kind of thought was interesting. But this one I liked a little bit more of the two, because it was really kind of easy to follow. It's just kind of like a fun, breezy action piece where it's just like one action bit, one next action bit, another action bit. And like there were some really well done and well written action sequences that I loved. And were like really like pulse pounding and was exciting. Now, I like this probably anything involving the Battle of Kelth's aftermath. This is my favorite because like there is an entire short story collection called The Mark of Kelth, I believe is what it's called. And I did not like that short story collection. I think it's one of the weakest books in the Horse Heresy series as a whole because I just find it kind of boring when a bunch of people are just fighting in caves. I don't know why. But this one was done well and was immediately captivated, and I liked it. So there you go. I did like the Rob Sanders one. The David Annandale one, which is the sister one called The Unburdened, is a good, it's well written, but it's very, very cerebral. And it's just like one character kind of like wrapping his head around the fact that he has betrayed one of his closest allies and friends and a person who, you know, saved him at one point in their lives. And what does it mean to completely fall to the powers of chaos and to do all these terrible things in the service of another goal? And it's like, am I actually just a pawn in these guys? Blah, blah, blah. And it's just like a lot of his inner workings, which, you know, is what makes a good story, usually, you know, if you're just trying to really dissect a character. But this one, it felt like almost that was like the entire thing, and you can really kind of get lost in the weeds. And I found that like sometimes my attention would drift because I'd just be like, yeah, okay, we're in his head, is it, blah, blah, blah. But nothing was actually happening in the story. It was just all him talking in his head, and there are still some good elements to this novella. And again, the writing is good. It's not bad writing. It's just very cerebral, and I found my attention drifting a little bit throughout it. Next up, now getting onto that vlog that I did, so I'm not going to get too far into these vloggies, because you could watch it when I rolled my d20 and read whatever the freaking die said. Cyberpunk 2077 Psycho Squad. This is a cyberpunk freaking comic book series, and it's pretty good. I liked it, had cool artwork, had a cool story, and yeah, it kind of like dives into this world in a little bit and has some really interesting class warfare discussions and trying to talk about like the issues with the policing and all that. And it does have a little bit of a nuance and interesting take. And, you know, obviously the cyberpunk world is everything's crazy because it's everyone's got like all these crazy technology in their brains and stuff. But at the core, what the story is talking about is, you know, very relatable to our current world. So, you know, like a good cyberpunk story is, there's a lot of fun, flashy bits to kind of get you entertained, but when you kind of dig into it, there is a deep critique of the current world. I'm not going to say it's not like super deep. It's like 100-page comic books. It's fun. The Dabo's Revenge by Mike Brooks. This is another Warhammer novella. I'm just doing all these Warhammer novellas, apparently. This one was really fun. This is the Red Gobbo, who is basically, he's just like a goblin. In Warhammer, goblins are called grots. It's just a thing. I think it's just so that they can, you know, copyright a different name. But anyways, this is a goblin who is working with a bunch of orcs as they try to take over a ship. The orcs mistreat the goblins to the nth degree, and eventually the goblins strike back and try to form their own society and figure out what to do. And yeah, it's a really fun, really funny. Some of the action in this is just a laugh riot from start to finish. Mike Brooks is one of the best authors in Warhammer. He really gets the humorous elements of the world, and he knows how to tell a compelling story, but also still incorporate all the silly, wild, goofy bits that are, you know, the building blocks of Warhammer 40,000 as a setting. So yeah, it was really, really fun. Had a great time with this. Also, some bits about class warfare. Something I had no fun with, and no one should ever read ever, is Batman Fortunate Son. Batman Fortunate Son is a comic book that's basically Old Man Yells at Cloud. But it's basically like Batman being like, Robin, you can't listen to this rock music. It's evil. And then Robin's like, you just don't understand. Rock music is actually really cool. And it's clear this guy has not had a rock musician in his like consciousness since the writer by this guy, since Elvis, because it's just a guy in the 90s going to be the next Elvis. And I'm like, oh my god. And it's like so preachy. This is a book that wants you to end with it and go, you know what? That rock music really is terrible. Thank you, Batman, for teaching me about the horrors of rock music. So the comic is just awful. Just completely awful. The artwork is bad. The writing is terrible. And then I looked up the history of the writer, Gerard Jones, who is a sex predator, apparently. And I was like, holy shit. And it kind of makes the entire book even more ironic in that he is going on and on about how deviant the, you know, record industry is and how all of these musicians are actually horrible people when he himself is a fucking monster. Make that one make sense for you. I mean, overly preachy conservatives who are terrible. I mean, that fits. Next up, an alien book, Aliens Harvest. So this is weird. This book is called Aliens, Alien Harvest, which just, you don't need to repeat aliens. You should call it Aliens Harvest or Alien Harvest. But I think for some reason they had to use the Aliens branding, I think, back in the day. I'm not sure, because this is a adaptation of one of the Dark Horse comic books. There was a series called Alien Harvest, and they adapted that into a novel format. These novels are very hit or miss, especially the Alien ones. So far, I have not really loved any of them. This one was entertaining. It wasn't terrible, but, you know, as a whole, I don't think this one is a must for the Alien franchise. There are really, really great books that are written in Alien and Aliens, the movie franchise, but this is not one of them. This is not a terrible read. There's definitely worse books that I've read, and I kind of listened to this from a fan-made audiobook, which was nice. I do own this as well. I just was listening to it on an audiobook, and yeah, it was okay. It was okay. What? What, you want to say something? You want to say something about Alien Harvest? He's like, yeah, it was my favorite book. Well, I'm sorry, you have terrible taste. Next up, the first 5-star of the video. This is the final book in the Dragonlance trilogy. That original Dragonlance trilogy. Which is, if you don't know what Dragonlance is, Dragonlance was a subset of Dungeons & Dragons. There was this own kind of universe and story, and there were multiple books released to coincide with it. And this is the one, this opening trilogy is the thing that, like, really impacted a lot of people growing up in the 80s as far as fantasy goes. It was really, really big. And I can see why. Especially finishing the trilogy. This is the final book in the trilogy, and it was so good, so impactful, so well written. Really, really fun, entertaining story that really wrapped everything up in a way that I was not expecting and a way that I really, really liked. So I rereading these in modern day, you would think that maybe they wouldn't hold up, but I think they do. I think that original Dragonlance trilogy holds up and is good reading, even from a modern reader. So yeah, it's weird. I got into the Dragonlance series because I randomly picked up one of the Dragonlance villains books. There was, which is like there was a line of, I think it's 6 books that were focusing on various villains in the Dragonlance series. And I found one in a little free library and I read it. And then I was like, whoa, I gotta read this book. And the guy who I read an entire book about does appear in this, but he doesn't do anything. God, what are you doing? Leave that alone. He's Lord Ariakis. This is the guy I read a whole book about, but he doesn't really do much in the actual story. He is just like kind of like a fun like presence, like being like, oh, I don't like you guys, bro. I'm evil. Just so you know, I'm evil. And I was like, I love that I read an entire book about a guy who doesn't really do anything. Like he doesn't really interact with any of the main characters. There's like 2 main characters that interact with him, but like that's it. Anyways, I just thought it was kind of fun. But yeah, this was great. If you're looking for some really good, well-written fantasy, I would recommend that original Dragonlance series. Next up, a RPG book, which is just I read the Dunwich Horror, which is the H.P. Lovecraft story, and then read a Call of Cthulhu source book that was kind of like the return to Dunwich. And it was good. It was fun. I thought it was a good little story, a good little encapsulation and expansion of the town of Dunwich to be played out in a role playing game scenario. And it had all the details that you would need in order to properly do like a dungeon master and kind of like lead people through this town, and has a whole bunch of rich details and little stories here and there that I found really interesting. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this, and I thought it was fun. Just be aware, this book is from the 80s, I think it's the mid 80s, and it is more dated. Some of the language here is more dated than the actual Dunwich Horror story, which is a surprise considering the story is by H.P. Lovecraft, and everyone knows that H.P. Lovecraft was a raging racist. But yeah, the Dunwich Horror is actually kind of like absent of a lot of his more, problematic things. Claude, what are you doing? What? What are you screaming for? It's 12:30. You're not getting that wet. Come here. Come hither. Anyways, this was a really good, well-written little source book, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Next up, another 5-star. This is one by another book by Mike Brooks, and this is also another sequel, so it's hard to a little bit really get into it. But this is The Ghost Legion, which is an Alpha Legion Warhammer story set not in 30K, which in the Horus Heresy, but set in the modern setting. I guess I say modern, but it is for 40,000 years in the future. But I just meant in the current, this book came out this year and is set in the farthest point of the current Warhammer setting. So yeah, this is all about the Alpha Legion, and they are kind of a more covert style of legionaries. Claude, what is your problem? What is your problem today? I'm trying to record a video. You turn. Anyways, this is kind of amazing because this kind of like encapsulates like everything that has come before with Mike Brooks in such a way that I don't know if Mike Brooks is doing any more Warhammer stuff. Because I recently got a NetGalley arc for his new individual science fiction book, and this book feels like it ties up all of these little pieces here and there from his prior books and kind of like encapsulate it all into one really good story. I do think that you could read this on your own, even if you didn't know a lot of other things about Warhammer, or even if you hadn't read the first book in this series, because it has like a very good, simple plot, which is basically, what if the Alpha Legion didn't just, like, they are used to showing up, disrupting things, and then leaving. That's kind of their tactics, where now that they've kind of like formed up as the quote-unquote Ghost Legion, they are trying to make their own area and their own culture and actually build something for a change instead of just tearing apart. What is your problem? You're driving me nuts. You're driving me nuts. You're driving me nuts. And so they're then have to fight a battle that is not in their normal skill set. Like, they have to do a straight up war to protect what they have, like, gained and the society that they've created, because they will just, if they don't actually stand up and protect what they have, then they are just going to fade away and just continuously do the same thing that they've been doing for like 10,000 years that have gotten them nowhere. So it's like, if you're a person who is really good at a certain type of thing, and you now are forced to do a thing that is not in your immediate skill set, and just kind of see how things shake out from that perspective. And yeah, it's a really, really good and entertaining book, and has a lot of really interesting things to say, and I absolutely loved it. So yeah, this was a really, really good book with a really cool kind of hook that brings in a lot of other characters. Speaking of the Horus Heresy, this, I lied about the Calth stuff, because this was actually the last book that I needed to read to complete what we've got so far in the Horus Heresy, and that is Chthonia's Reckoning, which was released and coincide with the third edition of Horus Heresy, the game that you play with the little dudes. So this was kind of meant to be like a tie into that. I believe it was third edition. I'll let you know in the thing. I'll be like, wow, it was actually blank edition. This was, for the most part, like a really interesting short story collection. But the thing is, the last story kind of like undercuts everything you've read, and it kind of makes the whole thing a little like, why did I read this? Like, I kind of got the feeling after I ended this, I was like, but why did I read this? Because the ending makes it all, like, the final story just says, all of that stuff you read don't actually mean shit. And I was like, well, I don't know, I don't love that. But I did like some of the short stories. Anyways, there are some of these short stories, because they're kind of like varying quality. It's a short story collection. I did like a lot of them, but the last one kind of leaves you with a sour note in your mouth, where you're kind of like, well, why did I read this at all then? The Wit and Wisdom of Spider-Man. This was an arc I had, and it was just basically a bunch of Spider-Man quotes with some cool vignettes, and it was kind of like a copy table book. And I liked it a lot. I thought it was fun. It was an enjoyable experience, even if Claude doesn't agree. Even if Claude the cat does not agree, for he meow meow meows forever and ever. But I thought this was really fun. It had a lot of really interesting quotes from even stories that I just have never even read, or would never probably have known to read. Some really weird, obscure picks in here, but I thought it was really, really fun and enjoyable. Yeah, just like a little, it was just like kind of like a little, kind of almost a disposable little read, but I had a good time with it. It was just a nice thing to sit down and read. Next up, The Arcane Gabbles of Harvey Walters, an Arkham horror novel by Rosemary Jones. This is, again, another sequel. There were a lot of sequels, so they're hard to kind of talk about in the totality, because this one is very much a sequel to Rosemary Jones' prior book. So you have to definitely have read that book before. I will say I really like this, because both of Rosemary Jones's, actually all of Rosemary Jones's work in the Arkham Horror franchise. An Arkham Horror is like a board game, and kind of there are like RPG elements as well. And these are all books that are set in that world. And all of hers have this really weird quality of, I genuinely mean it when I say this, cozy cosmic. because they're like cosmic horror stories, but they're also really cozy, and you really kind of like all the characters, and you want them to succeed, and you learn a lot about just what life was like in the 1920s, and like, since everybody is like a normal-ish character, and like people who are just like normal everyday people, you really kind of get a good glimpse at what the slice of life was like back in the day to live in the 1920s. And this was the conclusion of a 3-book series. The first book doesn't really need to be read because it was really good. I thought it was good as well, but it doesn't have as much to do with the main event of what's going on as, like, the prior book to the Drowned City, which is like there's a big flood happening in the city of Arkham, and yeah, this is like the culmination of that big flood. So, you do have to read the other books, but if you do, they're all really good. Next up is a book that, if you are somebody who was really, really anticipating the next reboot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and were disappointed when there was news that it was kind of canceled, I really, really would recommend this to kind of give you that same kind of itch. This is Slayers of Old by Jim C. Hines. And this is a book that is kind of like what would happen if there was an older Buffy who was kind of like in her midlife, and she had to kind of deal with the recurrence of a big bad showing up and had to do one last battle. And a lot of it is about, like, being middle-aged and what it's like to, grow up and be an adult and have to look back on some of the actions of your past and realize that other people were kind of manipulating you to act or to exist in a very specific way. So there is a lot of detail to this, and this is one of the things that I actually think that makes this a better version of a Buffy story is that it like takes a critical eye on the original concept of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And since it's not tied in with a franchise, it can create a world where there's a little bit more nuance to that story than, what would probably be experienced in a more modern reboot. Because this one kind of deals with, like, she is now somebody who looks after and cares for supernatural creatures, and she realizes that a lot of the creatures that she killed when she was a kid have their own senses of, morality and have their own inner worlds, and they're not immediately hostile if they're cared for and if they are, dealt with in a way that doesn't involve just straight up murdering them. And it's like, it kind of like gives a more nuanced view on what a monster is and how a monster operates, and are they always going to be a threat to society? Are they only a threat to society because of some other external force working upon them? And it's really, really compelling and really well written in that regard. And the characters in this are so good, because on top of the character who's like the middle-aged Buffy, there is an elderly wizard, and his powers come from his home, which is really kind of cool. He's got like a really old home in Salem that has like been entrenched with magic throughout the years, and he is able to call upon it and use his magic as if he was like a living part of the home. It was really cool kind of magic system and stuff like that. And then a aging succubus as well, who is like, well, I think she's half succubus, and like she's got a whole bunch of family drama. And anyways, it was awesome. This book was freaking fantastic. Really, really like this book, and really highly recommend this to anyone looking to get that little bit of, middle-aged flair to their Buffy the Vampire Slayer. An Hour Before Dark by Larry Hinkle. This is another short story collection, and these are really kind of weird, cosmic-y short stories, and it's almost a little novella, like it almost would be more closer to a novel or novella than a short story collection, because all of these short stories intertwine and have things and are in a world that interacts with each other in a lot of ways, where like there will be, the first story takes place on this weird plane that gets transported into another dimension, and as it's going through and you see all these like little vignettes that he sees as he's going through all these different dimensions, other stories will take place where they can look up and they see that plane go by, and they're like, what the fuck is up with that plane? We're in this weird crazy dimension. Wow, is there a plane here? Obviously better than that. I really like this. I thought this was a really well done cosmic horror. It was actually really scary at first. And then, of course, you kind of like understand what's going on, and like the scare factor gets down a little bit. That's just kind of what happens. That's kind of how horror works, right? The more you understand something, the less you are afraid of it. But this was still really solid, and I really had a good time with it. So if you're looking for something that has like a little bit more of like a dark, I almost felt like a Welcome to Night Vale-esque, which is the podcast vibe to this, where it was like there is bits of like more goofy, but it has like a very dark undertone in a lot of ways and can be very, very scary. So I really actually enjoyed this one. And there is a few books by this author, Larry Hinkle, that I need to check out. That's also in this setting. Apparently, the other books are a little bit more comedic, and this was way more dark than his normal stuff because he was going through some stuff. But hey, man, I'm hooked on this world. It's weird, it's wacky, and I want to know more. So I think I will read more from this author. The Ultimate RPG Villain Backstory Guide. Prompts and activities to create compelling anti-heroes, enemies, and bad guys. That's a big frickin' word salad, but that's pretty much what it is. This is a good storytelling tool if you are, trying to make your own RPG story and you want to create a good villain, and it has like a lot of really good storytelling prompts to help you kind of flesh out your character, and there's a little bit of gamified elements if you wish to use that to kind of like have even more fun and a little bit more random elements to kind of like creating your villain. But it has things like, what was his neighborhood like? How did his best friend growing up like affect him later on? Is there anyone in his life that he misses? And who led him down the path to become the villain? But yeah, this was really, really good and interesting and had a lot of really good techniques for kind of fleshing out and creating more three-dimensional villains, which is always handy and dandy, especially in like if you are running an RPG scenario where sometimes your characters won't always want to murder them. But sometimes they will. Sometimes they'll just show up and be like, we're just going to shank this guy. Other times they're going to be like, tell us your tragic backstory and let's make out. Which could happen, especially if you have like a bunch of bards in your party. So, yeah, now you know how to make a compelling character. Spit back the bones. Pew, pew, pew. I remember I got this arc because I thought it was going to be a monster romance where like a lady was romancing a bog. Which, now that I say it, how would that even work? But anyway, leave me alone. I want to live in a world where the bog and the woman could kiss. That's not really what this is about. This is a really, really well done gothic horror tale where there is a lot of like kind of romance in here, but it's not of the monster romance variety. It's more of a kind of like a richly detailed gothic tale, and there is a lot of romantic elements to gothic fiction. And when you're trying to sell a modern book, I guess you probably have better luck when you call it a monster romance than a gothic tale, because a lot of readers don't consume a lot of the gothic storytelling as much anymore, or at least not consciously. But this was really, really well done and really richly detailed, like so much to the point where it really rides the line between whether or not it's overwritten. I did not think it was overwritten. I thought it really painted a really in-depth, well done picture of everything that happens for these characters. But if you're a person who can sometimes get lost in the weeds, I could understand if you would call this overwritten. Regardless, really, really like this. Basically, this woman is coming back to her hometown that she has a frayed relationship to. Her family has a deep historical connection to the bog. And one of her siblings is missing, which is basically like the anniversary of one of her other siblings going missing. So she's trying to like find out what's going on and what is really happening in this town. And yeah, it's really, really good and well done. I liked it quite a bit. Indeed. Last few books, Enemy of My Enemy, a delightful Marvel crime novel. Now, apparently there is a branch of novels now that are under the Marvel crime delineation. I will say that I think that this just read like a normal Daredevil story, which I guess, like, there was a lot of crime elements in here, right? But it's also like written in a very typical Daredevil style. And if you're a person who has no experience with the character of Daredevil, this is one of those books where if you pick it up, you will instantly understand everything about the character. Matt Murdock has a complicated AF love life. So many X-Flames in that man's life. It's like, I don't know where he gets the time. He has a deeply inbuilt Catholic guilt complex, and all of the various levels of, legal representation. And what does he think about the law? Why does he believe in the law? What elements of the law does he believe in, even though he is a vigilante? And I thought this was just a really fun, solid little Daredevil story. Basically, the kingpin of crime has been murdered, and it seems like the Punisher is the one who's involved. But what's the real story? I don't know. Oh, I do know, because I've read the book. It's good. I liked it. A lot of people show up, though. Like, it's a pretty stacked cast. At one point, you're like, ninjas? Who's this guy? I don't know this guy. And, like, you don't need to know all the characters, but I like to look them up when I see them. I was like, the Black Tarantula? Who's that guy? And then I look him up. I was like, okay, that's the Black Tarantula. He doesn't have a big role in it. He's just one of the mob bosses. Because there's a whole bunch of mob bosses that are trying to take over the Kingpin and have a lot of fun little elements to it. Now, there is another 2 books in this series. One that hasn't come out yet, but the other one is the Jessica Jones story. And there is one that's coming out later this year, which is all about Luke Cage. So I'm really excited for both of those as well. I will definitely be checking out that freaking Jessica Jones one, because I love Jessica Jones. And last, but certainly not least, is Paladin and Necromancer by Adrienne Miller. I freaking love this book. It was so good. This is a book that, again, I thought was just going to be a romance. And there was a huge romance element in this. But this book kind of like starts out, it's the aftermath of a big war, and basically there's a couple who have a very strained relationship post-war. They are married. One is a paladin, the other is a necromancer. The paladin's god is very much not cool with necromancy. So he has basically a paladin is someone who takes, elements of their powers from a god who kind of like bestows it upon them. And it's like these 2 competing forces in this man's life. He is captain of the guard. There is something mysterious going on. And at first I thought this was going to be kind of like a really fun, more boots on the ground, kind of like slower burn, like almost little urban fantasy, because it was very much about them like trying to solve what is going on in this case and all of these like little things here and there. But then it expands in this big giant story at the end, but also does satisfy every element beforehand. But it makes a really good high fantasy tale because the world building is not done just all up front. Like, you actually get to know the characters, and the world slowly expands, which is something that people, when they write fantasy novels, like, a lot of times it's like the barrier to entry is that there is just mountains of world building before you get to the story. And it makes it so that people who don't normally read these books go like, I'm out. I don't want to read this. This is too complicated. There's too much going on. Not for me. This one has that benefit of it releases and expands the world very slowly and very naturally. So it's very focused on the characters that gets you hooked onto their relationships and their world. Is the secondary thing. And it just is a really well-told story with really cool characters, really, really interesting plots. And I do love how, like, even in a world where there's literal gods, it's still kind of like, gods are assholes. And it's just like, what does it mean to serve a god that wants you to decry the person you love? And it's just really, really interesting, and a lot of really cool kind of like moral quandaries. And loved all these characters. There's a sequel to this, and I'm going to be freaking reading it because I freaking love this book. And I've not heard anyone talk about it. So yeah, super high recommend. might be my favorite book of the month. I think Paladin Necromancer is going to stick with me for a long time. So yeah, and really cool disabled rep, because in the aftermath of the war, the Necromancer, whose name is Silver, she is, you know, bound to a wheelchair. And she's got like half skeleton arm because she had to like lose a bunch of her flesh to do a bunch of the high end spells. And yeah, it's just really freaking cool, man. Really cool, really interesting characters. And there's a lot of cats too. So you know me, love the cats. I had to put Cloud in another room because he's yowling too much, but yeah. So what did you guys read? Are there any of these books that you've read? Are there any of these books that you're going to read? I would love to know. Thank you guys, and may you always roll natural 20s in your life. Blah, blah.